Let's talk about the different ways you can use virtualization. I guess this is probably part of 6 or 7 of the lecture video series for Chapter 1 of Hands-on Virtual Computing. There are three major contexts, shall we say, in which you can apply virtualization as a technology. On the workstation, in the data center, or in the cloud. Um, Now, for workstation, we're going to start talking about workstation virtualization. Data center virtualization and cloud-based virtualization will be separate videos. In fact, about the first, I want to say, 3 or 4 chapters of this course will more or less focus on the workstation side of things. Um, Microsoft Hyper-V at the desktop, VMware Workstation at the desktop, and then we're going to move into the data center, shall we say, to do Hyper-V on the server and vSphere, ESXi, vCenter, etc., etc. And then finally, we're going to finish off in Chapter 10 with cloud virtualization. So the things we're talking about now will be relevant for the rest of the course. In terms of our workstation virtualization products, these are all Type 2 hypervisors. They're applications running on top of an OS, running on top of the hardware. So multiple layers of abstraction. Um, there's a lot of benefits to doing things this way. If you don't have a lot of heavy lifting to do, if you're just developing a skill set or testing a new application or learning a new operating system, etc., these can be very useful. Of course, we use this in the classroom. It's also a good way to learn new operating systems without committing yourself to wiping or even wiping a format and reinstall of your OS, and then of course having to do all your data back, restore all your data, install all the applications, etc., etc., etc. Or even a dual boot configuration, which doesn't throw away the old OS but adds a new one back behind it. I did a couple of videos, which I think are on my ITSC 1316 playlist about a Debian dual boot setup I built. Anyway, if you want to play with, say, Debian or Ubuntu or BSD or Fedora or Parrot or Kali or whatnot, and you don't want to rebuild a computer specifically to do that, a VM is a great way to handle things like this. There are some limitations, however. Um, Even if you've got a laptop and it's got wireless capabilities, you're going to have to work a little bit harder to punch that wireless NIC through to the VM, so that things like the wireless tools in Kali or Parrot can use them. Anyway, so we can use these for running virtual appliances, running new and different desktop environments, running, say, a specific application. One other application I found for this, um, I have taught Cisco courses in the past, and one thing I had to do occasionally was grade packet tracer work, which was created by my students in different versions of packet tracer. And before I understood that you could actually have 2 different versions of packet tracer installed at the same time, I actually created a VM just to host the version of packet tracer I didn't use all the time. You can also use this for software development as sort of a testing environment for yourself. Say, for example, you're doing a port from one OS to another of some application. So you have it running in the native OS, and you build it for the new one. You can deploy it into a VM and test it there without actually having to walk across the room to another machine. This can also be very useful for your help desk. Sometimes help desks have exhaustive documentation, wikis, and walkthroughs and things like that. Sometimes, however, if they can literally pop up a VM of the OS the user is using to do whatever it is that they're doing, so that the help desk analysts can test the same process, that can also be very useful. And it's probably even more useful than, say, static images in a walkthrough document. Let's talk about some of the available workstation products. Now, notice I note that this is not an exhaustive list. There are things that are not on this list. Say, for example, Parallels is not on this list. Parallels is a virtualization option for Macintosh. So we've got VMware, we've got some Microsoft options, we've got Oracle VirtualBox, and there are other virtualization products, say that in any case, with most things that you want to do in a Linux environment, there's probably 2 or 3 different ways to do it. You can install VMware or VirtualBox in Linux. You can also install other virtualization solutions. So the big one that we're going to be working with is VMware Workstation. It is a free download. You get 30 days, then you have to provide a license. Y'all don't have to worry about that, in part because everything you need to do is in MindTap anyway, and also because as TSTC students, you're entitled to log into on the hub, and there's a whole bunch of VMware products there, not just VMware Workstation and Player, vSphere, vCenter, VMware Fusion, etc., etc. VMware Fusion. Now, this course is going to talk about VMware Workstation 12. We're already using VMware Workstation 15 in the classroom. So if the instructions look a little antiquated based on out of date based on what you've actually done in the classroom, don't sweat it too much. The fun thing about VMware Fusion 7 is that VMware Fusion is still at version 7. It has been for, I want to say, the last 3 to 5 years. I looked online. The current version of VMware Fusion is at 7.12. So they've they've been in version 7.x for a while now. Obviously, they're very conservative about incrementing their version numbers. Of course, with Microsoft, we've got the Hyper-V client available on Windows 8 Professional or later. It ships with Windows, but you have to activate it in the control panel, basically by going into the install and remove Windows features. There's a lot of other fun stuff in there, Telnet client, TFTP client, various other things. So there's a lot of Windows that is just kind of waiting until you turn it on. Let's see, VMware Workstation Player is sort of a stripped down version of VMware. It's good for virtual appliances. If you don't have to make a lot of configuration changes to that appliance, maybe Player is a better option than Workstation. But if you have to do things like alter your configuration at all, so for example, one of the things that you can't do in Workstation Player is tell it when to take snapshots. Whereas with Workstation, you can go into your snapshot options and tell it when and if you want it to take a snapshot. We're going to be working with, actually we're going to be working with all 3 of these, VMware and Hyper-V and VirtualBox. So as I said in the intro video, if you've only worked with one of these or 2 of these, you're going to round out your skill set. For a lot of you who've mostly worked with VMware Workstation, you're going to get your feet wet on Hyper-V and VirtualBox. If you were doing your work before for another class in either Hyper-V or VirtualBox and not so much in VMware, you're going to have a new experience. That's one of the things I like about this course, is that we don't get dialed in too quickly to one solution. VMware is the class leader, but you do need to know about the others. Next, I'll talk about data virtualization in the data center. Thanks.